All right, so we're back, guys. Sorry about that. We had a slight technical difficulty, but we were deep in it. We were deep in it talking about. We want to tail end of talking about the 2000s and talking about the films that were out at that time, X-Men and X2, which we just covered. Some of the animation that was available when it came to X-Men with Evolution and with Wolverine and the X-Men. I know we were just commenting offline and just talking about some of the interesting things that they were setting up that we just never had a chance to really see play out. They had, like I said, we were talking about just now, Julian, they had Age of Apocalypse. So they had Cyclops with the long hair and like the whole, like they had him like positioned right next to Apocalypse and a lot of those characters. They did something awesome with like Polaris. Like I've never seen Polaris used in that way. And I feel like that show really did a great job in its use of Polaris and really making her like a dynamic and cool character, because she wasn't really given. She was given basically an episode in the animated series. I mean, it's one of my favorite episodes, that the Iceman episode, but they gave her way more to do in Wolverine and the X-Men. All right. Well, we did have a couple of controversial is too strong a word, but we did have a couple of films that weren't as well received, whether it was Last Stand, that first crack at the Phoenix Saga. I know you want to touch on that.
I never hated that movie. I never hated it.
Okay.
It was the only movie where the Wolverine story wasn't the main plot.
That's true. I'll give you that. I will give you that.
He was a character. He was important because he's the lead, but it wasn't literally about like Wolverine. You either have to be a hero or Wolverine. This is how you came to be. And I was like, that was one thing who always bothered me about the X-Men movies. As I like rewatched them, I was like, yo, the X-Men is about a lot more. It's more about Jean Grey than it is Wolverine, let's be honest. But
no kidding. Yeah. Well, and also when they did Days of Future Past, which I'm jumping ahead, but when they did that, I was kind of mad that they replaced Kitty Pryde with Wolverine.
Yeah.
I know for movie's sake they need Hugh Jackman in it, but I just was like, no, this is Kitty's like moment. You've taken it from her.
Yeah, I agree.
And we also had our first crack at Deadpool as well. Let's not forget about that X-Men Origins Wolverine movie.
Oh.
And that CG, the Professor X that we got in the end.
I've never seen the final version of that movie.
Really?
I've only saw the bootleg that came out before it came out.
Oh, right.
With the unfinished, like everything.
FX, yeah.
And I was like, I never need to watch this again. Like, I've never seen the final version. I've seen like green caps of like what Deadpool was supposed to look like, but I'll never know. Like, it was bad. I was like, this is trash. It's Wolverine. Like, how do you mess this up? How?
Yeah, it's true. Especially because they did it so well in X-Men 1 and 2. So you think they could just do it well again, but. And then there was the whole Magneto Origins movie that they were going to do.
Right. Which is actually a perfect segue. It gets us right into the next decade with the 2010s. Because Chandler, just like you were saying with that idea with them doing that Magneto solo film, a lot of it basically got absorbed into First Class. A lot of those story ideas that they were considering to do ended up basically being the whole arc that we saw with Fassbender as a younger Magneto in First Class. So I always like to consider like the 2010s kind of like the I guess you could say the renewal era, because I feel like if we're kind of comparing eras, we just talking about the 90s that we can all attest is like a golden age in terms of a lot of the great things that we were getting out of the X-Men in various other forms of media. Don't get me wrong, it was great in the 2000s to get a lot of those films, the introduction of the film aspect, but I feel like it was also a time of like excess where while we were getting a lot of great things, we were getting a lot of like not too good things in terms of like content, in my opinion, when it came to the X-Men. But like as I said, going in 2000, we had First Class. We had the Wolverine, which is a fun film until the very end or the third act of that.
Oh,
film.
I like that. I like that. I like that whole movie. It was a Wolverine comic. That was a movie. Like
I watched it. I don't remember it though.
Like
with Silver Samurai.
It was like okay, like
the Terminator Silver Samurai.
Yo, if you put Silver Samurai in as he is, people are gonna think he's lame. Most people can accept like a mechanoid Iron Man style Silver Samurai way version, just like a Japanese dude in a Silver Samurai outfit with a sword that he can like light on fire or freeze. They would be like, yo, that's it, B. It'd be Elektra 2. It'll be Elektra 2. They were like, this is it? This is what we doing. This is what Wolverine has to face. Like, all right, okay. But I get you. Like, I get why people can see it's kind of cheesy, but like everything else about that movie was like
everything else I love about that movie. Everything else was great until we got into that third act. Like I was good up until everything, all the way up to like the ninjas, all of that, until we got into like the whole craziness with Silver Samurai.
See, for me, I actually think the 2010s is a dark period for the X-Men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because like when you talk about the entire pop culture landscape of what X-Men were, at that point in time, because of the machinations between like Marvel and not wanting to deal with Fox and not wanting to give them any more characters, they literally downplayed the X-Men to pull up the Avengers. And like there was no real X-Men cartoons, there was no X-Men video games, the toys took a hit. Like
the comics were lame.
The comics was wild trash. They didn't even want to put them in games. Like there was almost times where they would literally block them from being in stuff. Like the reason why Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is whack is because there's no X-Men in it. Because Marvel said they can't have no X-Men in it.
Yeah,
and
you
like
only got Wolverine everywhere. I thought like everywhere you looked, it's Wolverine, Captain America, Hulk, but like there was no other X-Men that existed in merchandising.
And those movies was like the only thing that was like, if you want to see X-Men on the big screen, that's it. Like you better take it because they made everything else about the X-Men trash on purpose.
It's true.
Literally.
What was that? Is this the? I'm trying to remember. I feel like this is the era. Maybe I'm getting confused by a couple of years, but and I was trying to find it, man. I was trying to find your like hour-long rant. I can't remember what podcast it was on. Your hour-long rant about I guess we were talking. I guess it was AVX.
Oh, Avengers! Oh, man, that didn't make no sense. It didn't make no sense. It was. Oh my goodness, they do. They messed up so many things.
It's in there. It's out there in the ether somewhere. I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna share it with you, Chandler. It is
good. I want to hear this.
Yo, that's when I was deep before I cut myself off from Marvel. I was still reading X-Men every month, and I mean X-Men. I mean like Wolverine, Deadpool, whatever 4-issue miniseries. I was reading almost like 60-75% of what Marvel put out, 75% of what DC was putting out. So I was keeping the track, and I was like, yo, this ain't it, Chief. But like the movies would be all right. Like the Wolverine would come out. I was like, yo, this is kind of good. First Class, yo, Magneto was James Bond, and he was just killing Nazis.
Yeah.
Like you can just watch that as a show. I can read that as a book. Like, and that I liked about those movies is that the main characters was Professor X and Magneto. And like it wasn't about Wolverine at all. Even in Days of Future Past, he was like, I'm from the future, things are bad, I gotta help you. But it's like really about like, can we get like Professor X to care again? Can we go get Save Magneto and
but they still found a way to throw him in there.
For one movie, though. For one movie.
In there. You didn't need that cameo. As much as I love that cameo, it wasn't like necessary. Like you could have just had an X-Men movie, believe it or not, without Wolverine.
You did want to see him with that cast, though. You wanted to see him with Fassbender and McAvoy and Jennifer Jennifer Lawrence. You wanted to see them you wanted to see them together. Like,
I mean, I get you, but I'm just saying, like, it. I feel, and you guys have kind of basically touched on it briefly just now, but and this is nothing to Hugh Jackman, because Hugh Jackman is awesome. What he did with Wolverine is awesome. It kind of went the way of what you have with Robert Downey Jr. with the Avengers, where like he became so synonymous with that role, and it became such an iconic role that it basically like that character was basically like shoehorned out to the forefront of that entire like franchise in one form or shape or another. Where like a lot of other characters that are equally awesome didn't really get a chance to really kind of get their due. Like, I'm still pissed off about how they handled Jubilee in those X-Men films.
Yeah,
like,
it's insulting.
It's like,
I don't know if you've seen like the what is it, the cut footage that they had with that character. I want to say in the Bryan Singer films, like they gave her like electrical powers or something. And I'm like, that is not Jubilee.
but I think, because the interesting thing, I think, as much as she's a part of the 90s X-Men, I think there was some revisionist history in the 2000s and the 2010s to say that like Jubilee is bad. She sucks. Because I've seen that online back when it became forums in the social media. The same with Gambit. There's an idea now that Gambit is like a terrible character and he's just cool to be cool. And it's like, yo, he was the number 2 guy. Like, if the X-Men was the Bulls, Wolverine was Jordan, Gambit was Pippin, but cool. Like, Gambit was that guy. I just
correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't he like, in terms of his power set, he was like so OG that like he had to actually cut back or have something done to him to put his powers in check? If I remember correctly,
that came later. Like
by Sinister,
when he first came out, literally he was just cool and he could throw cars and blow up, and he had like Dracula-like powers. Like he could just make you like him. He could just make you do stuff. And you were like, oh, what? You're reading the back of his trading card, like, oh, like, did you know that Gambit can also like make you do things? It's like, oh, I didn't. Now I know now. And later on, like they added all this other stuff that he could do. And it's just like, all right, but that was like in like the weird 2000s period where they didn't know what to do with Gambit, and they didn't know what to do with like most of the characters, and then they like killed them all except for like 200, and then that was a period. But I think the difference you're talking about is that like in the comics, Iron Man was never that popular in the mainstream.
No.
Wolverine became popular in like 85. Like he was already on like t-shirts and toys and in video. He was in when they put the X-Men in Spidey and His Amazing Friends, like he was front and center. Like it was like, oh, Wolverine. It's like you knew from a jump. It's like Wolverine, Hulk, Spider-Man, Captain America. Like you ain't nobody cared about Iron Man.
No, it's true.
Robert Downey Jr. made people care about Iron Man. Them casting Wolverine was like, yo, who you gonna cast as Wolverine, because he's it. He's the star of the franchise.
But I'm saying, here's what I'm saying. It could have easily gone the other way, because I remember how people felt, obviously before they saw the film, how they felt about that casting, because a lot of people forget, like people were in the same way that you see with like whenever Joker gets cast. Like I remember people were flagging on Jackman just because of his height, and they were like, oh, he's a theater guy. Like I don't think he could pull off Wolverine. But I'm like, actor's an actor. It doesn't really matter. Like if you could pull it off, you could pull it off. Because I mean, even that a lot of people forget that Dougherty Scott was actually cast in that role, the villain from Mission Impossible 2. He actually had already, signed on the dotted line. He was already supposed to be that character, and just because of like, fate, whatever you want to call it, he, wasn't able to commit to going on the set to do that film because he was still doing Mission Impossible 2. And then they had to, they ended up getting Hugh Jackman to do the role, and obviously the rest was history.
Man,
so,
what a decision.
Yeah.
Mission Impossible 2 is terrible.
I'm so curious who the new Wolverine's going to be. I hope they do a short guy, though. I feel like I miss the short jokes in X-Men comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they've been talking about. Well, I tell you what, we will get to that. I know one other thing that I wanted to touch on in terms of that in terms of this decade of the 2010s is what you have with what is it, Deadpool? Because I mean, a lot of people don't really credit it as being a part of that whole universe of what Fox was doing with the X-Men characters, but I count them just by virtue of like what they were doing of all the other X-Men characters that they were including, in that film, even though a lot of times they kind of put them in a solo category. But I guess that's another reason why I kind of gave it that stipulation of what they were saying, of what I was saying with that decade. I know you guys were commenting on what was happening in comics. I want to say the end of the 2000s gave me a very bad taste in my mouth of like some of the things that we were, seeing in other forms of media. So to see that, they were getting back on track with First Class, that we ended up getting Days of Future Past, that we got, Deadpool, that I didn't think they were ever going to make a movie out of. I didn't think that was ever going to happen. Mind you had a couple of, films in there that were a little questionable. That second crack at Dark Phoenix, which we recently got, Apocalypse, which I'm very conflicted about. I mean, there are things about it that are, that I liked, but there are obviously things about it that didn't really work at all for me. And then, like I said, Wolverine, I enjoy about 70-80% of it. But
and then Logan.
Logan, obviously, duh.
A top 3 superhero film.
Yeah, Logan's incredible. And Patrick Stewart, I'm so glad he came back for that.
Yes. If there was ever a capper on what the X-Men franchise was, is that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And like even though like they're gonna recast Wolverine, I still kind of want to see Wolverine one time with like at least some of the other actors from like this little MCU or whatever. Like just have old man Logan in there for a second. He can even die again. Just like you have new Wolverine. I don't know. Like he ain't never get that shot. Like I wanted before you guys were cool. It was him and Toby holding that whole thing on their shoulders. and Logan was so good. It was so precedent to like what's going on now. And when it came out, like it talks about right now, and a lot of superhero films don't talk about society, don't have themes that deep. But there's a lot of stuff going on in Logan. Like I could watch that joint over and over and over and over again. Yeah, it's Caliban in it. It's Caliban in it.
Caliban. So so that leaves us, and we were touching on it a bit. Here we are in 2020, new decade. Some new things that are on the horizon, obviously, kind of like what we can see with hopefully within the MCU. I know that there have been a lot of discussions of some ways that the X-Men can possibly be introduced in this new era of like superhero films that we have. I've heard all types of things, as I'm sure a lot of you guys have, whether it's like with the Eternals, how the Eternals may possibly play a role in kind of setting the stage for mutants possibly maybe being descendants of Eternals.
No.
I hope not.
I'm about to say perhaps what they do with Falcon and Winter Soldier, because I guess they're delving deeply into the Super Soldier program, so maybe they use that as a backdoor. I don't know. Since we already have some elements already in the MCU that kind of give us a backdoor into some elements with mutants. With like I said, the Super Soldier program. Since we already have Captain America, you already have that connection between him and Wolverine with that Super Soldier program between Weapon 1 and Weapon 10. So I don't know if they'll try to use that as a window to, explain his characters, since they kind of use that as a streamlined way to explain some of the other characters, like with the Hulk and with a few other characters. So perhaps But one element that I do want to touch on, and I want to pitch it over to you, Chandler, is I've heard there have been rumblings that we might see the alien race known as the Brood, perhaps in Captain Marvel 2. So I don't know what your thoughts on it, because I've been checking out some of your stuff, and I know you're big on at least currently right now. A lot of what your feed has been the Brood. What are your thoughts on that, and possibly having like that sequel delve into something that's pretty? I don't know. I don't know if Disney can kind of pull that off, and having something that dark or that like horror esque in their kind of like family friendly universe.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. So on our podcast, we're just doing the Brood saga right now. We, in our podcast, X Reads the Podcast, we just cover issue by issue per episode. So we're just currently on 163, I think. So that's why we're currently in. You see all the Brood stuff on our feeds and our banners and stuff. I mean, I think the Brood are really cool characters to have as villains, because there's multitudes of them. So CGI wise, you can totally have big battles, and it doesn't matter because you're not attached to these villainous characters.
Faceless,
bug, kind of faceless creatures, except for the Brood Queen. I think it's cool. I mean, if they bring Brood into Captain Marvel 2, it makes sense because she's in that kind of Skrull kind of world, so it's just like the fact the Brood is part of that intergalactic world. It'd be awesome if the Shi'ar made an appearance. That would be huge. Maybe if Lilandra makes a little cameo, but I think that would be awesome. I would love if the Brood made an appearance. I don't know if it makes sense to tie the X-Men into that. I think it would be cool to have the Brood in the MCU, just because they're just kind of cool villains to fight. But I feel like the Doctor Strange multi-universe film could be a nice potential opening to bring in some of those characters, because they're introducing the fact that there's multiple universes, multiverse. So that the X-Men films that everybody knows exist are just in a different universe.
I was thinking about that. Yeah. I don't know what your thoughts about that, Julian, is.
The DCification of Marvel. I don't have a problem with it. I always thought that like the easiest way to do this is if you do the original Secret Wars, the X-Men go into a thing, the Fantastic Four go into a thing, the Avengers go into a thing, and they end up on this battle world, and you can make the Beyonder an Eternal or whatever you want to do, and then they have to come together, defeat the Beyonder. You also introduce Doctor Doom and Magneto, and Magneto isn't even a bad guy in it technically. He's put on his own little base because he's not good or bad, going by the Beyonder. And then when they get out of it, they're all back on one Earth. You give Spider-Man a new outfit. You change some characters around. The Hulk is different again. You get a new Iron Man or something. And then you had the FF and the X-Men running around doing it's literally it's sitting there. Like there's not a lot even work to do.
Yeah, that's true.
You build up the Secret Wars. And then you can build up from that. You build up to Galactus. Like that's 10 that's the 10 part, the 10 movie part, and then that's the 23rd, 22nd movie. There you go. Like it's over. There you go. I gave you 10 more years of movies. TV
I was gonna say probably I absolutely agree with you. Like that definitely seems feasible. Another thing that I think that might happen now that we have Kevin Feige as the COO of all of Marvel. Maybe he's planting the seeds already in those comics, and what we've been seeing, like with I guess what they've done recently with Krakoa. Perhaps they'll use that as their window in what they'll do with the X-Men.
That's too militant. That's too militant.
But it's different though, because I mean, you can't do Professor X in a wheelchair. Like you have to approach Professor X differently. You have to approach Magneto differently. And I mean, what better way to do it than to do it, approach it, in some other subverted in some way that we're not expecting.
I feel like if they do that, then the X-Men are going to be introduced as villain characters, so to speak. Which
I mean, that's an
making
easy
sense.
backdoor for your AVX crossover film, and then you can actually do Phoenix differently.
Careful with those eye rolls.
Right, yo, I really like.
I know you can't say it like the comic, but I'm just saying
they could do it. Like a lot of stuff happened, like
because we can't. I'm sorry, guys, we can't do a third. We can't do a third Phoenix Saga. It's gonna have to be done differently.
They don't need a Phoenix Saga at all. Like I don't like even if you use the Phoenix, you don't do the Phoenix Saga. Like you just tie that thing into like the Coming of Galactus or something. Like she dies facing off of the Silver Surfer or something. Or like whatever. She becomes a herald, and that's how she. You can do a whole bunch of ways to do the Phoenix Saga and remix it. And I just think in terms of bringing in the X-Men, you have to bring in the Fantastic Four, and they're so tied together because you get Franklin Richards and then like you have all these other like intermutant and like Fantastic Four family stuff, and you know Magneto can just be shown as like a kind of good guy as we used to him. Kind of, we always think he's kind of a good guy as it is now. Like, come on, man, is he really wrong? Is he wrong? Think about what he's talking about. He lived through the Holocaust. He knows what he's talking about. Humans are trash. Humans are trash.
Yeah, they are.
You cried all day.
Yeah, man. So I know we were talking about all 40s eras, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and now currently. I think we can all agree that the 90s were awesome. While we got some great things out of the 2000s, nothing can touch the 90s. But with that being said, you know, before we wrap all of this up, you know, what are some things that you guys, even outside of what we were talking about the MCU, some things that you guys would like to see out of the X-Men going forward, perhaps in the next couple of years? Or where you picture maybe based on what you are seeing right now, you've seen that it might go?
I need a Storm-centric movie or a Storm leading X-Men movie. I just feel like we got way too much Wolverine in the past couple decades, and I like Cyclops, but I think in a movie format, to not see an actor's eyes for the whole film, it's going to be hard to really connect. But I think a Storm-centric movie, or just put her in the leadership position or the central figure of an X-Men film, is what I would love to see, because I think that would just be awesome. And and if they want, they can connect her into the Black Panther world. You know, if they want to somehow introduce her through that, which I know is jumping through timelines, but since they've established Black Panther, they could introduce her and kind of get her into the world.
Yeah. I just want to see them kind of put back to what they were. They were like the top franchise. They sold the most comics. They were the most popular characters. Like the Avengers was C-League. It was all about the X-Men. I want to see new video games. I want the new cartoon.
Oh, a new cartoon! I'm about to say, and we didn't even touch that. Apparently, though, we might be getting a new cartoon. So I'm really looking forward to that out of Disney Plus. So maybe we'll see.
Yeah, a new video game is way overdue, and I'm a big nerd for RPGs. I want an X-Men RPG. I mean, we get beat-em-up X-Men games all the time, but I want to do story-driven, you know, turn-based action kind of.
That would be interesting. They tried with that one weird RPG game where you made a character and then like it kind of failed and it wasn't good. But yeah, like if you can get something like Final Fantasy 12 but with X-Men people,
yeah,
man, give me my jet, fly around.
Yeah.
Signals.
Take my money.
Nimrod is in there. You know, you fight him.
Yeah, exactly. Time jumping. You can time jump easily.
Oh, yeah, you can do a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, in those games. Anyways, please give it to me. Marvel, Disney.
There you guys have it. Guys, thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode. Chandler, can you tell folks where they can find your stuff, man?
Yeah, absolutely. So X Reads Podcast. It's at X Reads, the letter X, READS Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your podcast.
All right, cool.
All right, you can find me on social media as Julian Lytle, Lytle. I have a podcast called Ignorant Bliss. It's at ignorant-bliss.com. It's on all the ways you can find and listen to podcasts. I interview like other creators and people who make stuff about making things. I also do movie reviews on Adobe and Punch Drunk Critics. And I think that's about it. That's all I really do.
Cool. Chris Claremont, if you're listening, be a guest on my podcast.
Yeah, jump on in.
There you go. You heard that, Chris. All right. So again, guys, I'm Brandon Choi, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Again, I want to thank you guys for coming on. Make sure that you like and subscribe, all that jazz, whether it's a Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Be on the lookout next week as I will have a couple of awesome guests on as well to talk about the movie industry and this phase one that we're having with a lot of our businesses phasing, back into play and getting to some sense of normalcy. But as I said, next week, till next time, see ya. Bye.
Bye.